how did you ensure, I guess, a good, healthy team environment?
Was to try and make it easier for the dentists in private practice to have trained staff. Dentist model, we're very good because I can handpick my best students to work for me. Give me a 40-year-old woman with a mortgage and 2 kids.
He's going to be committed.
Exactly. For one of my students who's used to 1-hour appointments as a dentist, seeing 5-10-minute appointments, seeing 200 patients a day, to change a wire or to check an aligner, it literally is a 5-minute appointment.
Yeah. But learning to delegate itself is a skill.
I think it is, because
Derek Mahony, a pioneer in early interceptive orthodontic treatment, a global thought leader awarded one of the top 100 doctors in the world, have completed numerous research on the link of airway facial growth and systemic health problems. Derek Mahony, respected educator in many universities internationally, having taught in more than 120 countries, founder of Full Face Orthodontics in dental sleep medicine with 6 branches and more than 150,000 patients. However, today, MaskOFF is about covering the leader behind this mask. He will take us back to his beginnings and his failures through his journey.
when I ask the patient who comes to me, who is your dentist? 90% of the time they don't know. So that relationship doesn't seem to be there.
I guess what you do in the first few years of your career, whether in dentistry or any career, really, really transform the rest of your life.
Yes.
What's the future like?
I don't think any new graduate would have like what I call the golden era that I was lucky enough to be in. You have younger people with better eyes than you. You're using this because you've done that class 3 jaw. This is your millionth case that you're treating, and you kind of can do that with your eyes closed.
Firstly, I'd like to start with how are you feeling today?
It's that nice time of the year, we finished our last clinic for the year yesterday. The weather's beautiful. I think I'm looking forward to some time off. We had a really busy year this year, coming back full time from the COVID pandemic, etc., etc. So I'm feeling pretty relaxed.
That's good. That's good. It's a reflective time for all of us on what we've achieved and setting new goals for the year ahead. Take us back to your childhood. What was it like?
I came from a very working class family background. My parents were first generation immigrants to Australia, and my dad always says that if it wasn't for Gough Whitlam, they would never been able to come here, before Whitlam opened up the non-European immigration policy, under Robert Menzies in Australia. It was a very white Australian policy. So if you were white European, it was very easy to immigrate, hence why we have so many Irish and English and Italian. But when they opened up the borders to Asia, that was a big thing. So my parents always instilled into me the fact that they left their country not for themselves. They had a very comfortable lifestyle, but they could see the future wasn't going to be there for their kids. And so I think the work ethic that was installed into me as a young kid was, we've given up all this for you, you need to do well. So that was good, but also I think a lot of pressure going up.
Yeah, I think I've spoken to a lot of people, and most of immigrant kids feel the same.
Yeah.
The pressure that your parents left something for you, so you have to actually. Did you feel like you have to prove them that it was worthwhile?
Exactly. There's that guilt that they, and it's good and bad. I mean, I always used to almost reject the fact or resent the fact that when all my friends finished school, they went and played cricket or football. I had to go to home tutoring, and Saturdays, I used to love playing cricket, but sometimes I couldn't because we had scheduled, every extracurricular activity from learning to play the piano to further, maths classes and all that sort of thing. Yeah, so that was look, in hindsight, it sort of
helped you.
Yeah, it helped me. But at the same time, maybe I always say, I look now and you see all of these, I don't know what the right word is. Is it politically correct to use the word helicopter parent? That parent that, as an orthodontist, I mainly treat kids.
Yeah, so you see all the parents.
You see this poor little kid who's kind of like has no time to himself.
Yeah.
And when the parents are trying to schedule just an orthodontic adjustment, they're asking, can you do Sundays? Because that's the only time my kid is available.
Wow.
And this
kid's
9 years old, and you think, wow, is he going to grow up to be a normal person socially and interactively? Yeah. So yeah, I think there's good and bad, but overall I think I had a very happy childhood. We grew up in a small little apartment in Liverpool, which was a big area of new immigration back then. You know, it was Gough Whitlam's Federal electoral seat. So it was a very multicultural background, and I think now if you look at Sydney and Melbourne, it's so good. It's so multicultural.
Everywhere.
Right. Yeah. And now I'm 56, so I'm trying to think.
So young.
So this is 54 years ago.
Wow.
Australia was a different place. It was very. We were always called the Wogs. You know, that's
you were called.
Yeah, in that sort of area. And
in Liverpool.
In Liverpool.
It's so different now.
Now it's almost the other way around, right? You're called the odd white person or Anglo-Saxon person, but back then it was very white Australian, very working class.
Yeah.
But the immigration was coming in because it was cheaper housing, etc. So it's a kind of, I love living in Australia, and how lucky are our kids that they're in this very culturally accepting environment, religiously, and we just don't have the headaches you see all around the world.
No, everybody has equal opportunity to give life a chance, give their dreams a chance, and
I always say,
that's all you can give someone, their freedom.
I always say, Kevin Rudd was one of our good prime ministers, and he grew up very working class. Used to go to uni to pay his way through. Used to sleep in his car.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Not. So it's good to be able to say anyone can make it in Australia if you apply yourself, and that's what my parents instilled in me. That sort of land of opportunity. Try not just to be this level. Try to be above that.
But was it a lot of? I know we discussed compared to other kids. Was it a lot of pressure on you as a young teen, as a young adult, to have to, I guess, try and find out yourself and who you're going to be?
Yeah, I think my family's cultural background was sort of like, they'd kiss you goodbye in the morning for school, and they'd say, you're either going to be an engineer or a doctor or a dentist, or just don't come home.
Or a failure.
Exactly. It was that sort of in a nice way, not in.
Were you the same father for your kids, I guess?
Definitely in the work culture, and pushing them and giving them that extra opportunity, but a little bit more relaxed in that I wanted them to have a more balanced background. Yeah.
I guess we were just discussing about your 4 beautiful kids.
Yes.
God bless. And it's Christmas time, so everybody's coming together. Have you pushed any of them to do dentistry?
I wanted all of them to do dentistry. That was my dream. I actually started with 4 practices, and I didn't want to have any more. And my goal was, when I retired, I'd give one to each of my kids.
Yes.
So my ultimate dream was that they'd all become orthodontists. Right? That didn't exactly work out. They're all very good kids, and they're happy with what they do. My daughter maybe still has a chance. She is an oral health therapist. She got into dental school, but then decided it wasn't the right time of life for her to do that. I think every parent, no matter what profession you're in, would love to be able to have their child working next to them and share everything they've learned. So that child gets that amazing start.
That head start.
I always say to my kids, I wish my dad was a successful dentist, then I would have had to climb up the ladder, which is good and bad. And then there's always that story that, the first generation works hard, the second generation tries to do better, the third generation blows it all.
Yes.
I don't,
hopefully not the case.
Yeah, I hope not the case. Let's see, they're still young enough, and we'll see what pans out. But I think my regret from that point of view, I got married very early. I think I was 22 when I got married.
That's so young.
Yeah. So everything was early.
Was it normal back then?
Ish, I guess. I think. You just sort of it's very different to now. My kids, they have partners that they have dated and lived with, but marriage doesn't seem to be a normal thing now,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Whereas in my culture, it was almost that if you wanted to see someone seriously, you ended up marrying them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at 22, what do you know?
That's true.
You know, if you want to choose a life partner,
Yeah.
you marry someone at 22, people mature differently, people find different things. That's a hard thing. But I think, getting back to my kids, I think my regret, and I've had to do my time again, I didn't spend enough time with them when I was building the empire. You know, I would work Monday to Friday and most Saturdays, so it meant that my wife would end up doing most of the sort of, you know, taking to the school sports and things like that. Whereas I see now a much better balance with younger graduates. I know when I interview a young orthodontist and I'm talking to them about hours of work, they're I just want to do 3 days. You know, very different culture to when I graduated, where people are willing to work till 7 p.m. at night and things like that. But then they say we want to spend time with our family, our friends, our children. So I think that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's frustrating as a practice owner when you. I would say, are you kidding? I always say, you know, it's a new orthodontist that literally no runs on the board, graduated last year, wants to work just 3 days a week in
That's
his
lack of luxury.
Yeah, in his first year out, right?
Yeah.
And
I think that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. How did you balance your family life with building all of this?
I think the correct answer is very poorly.
Yeah.
I threw myself totally into building 2 empires. One was the practice itself, and I trained in the UK, in the Eastern, which was very prestigious orthodontic faculty. And
at the same time that you were building your practice?
I graduated as a dentist, and again, because I came from a fairly you know, average working class background, to afford to live in the city and pay for tuition. Back then, and thank God I'm a product of Gough Whitlam, we didn't have any university fees for 5 years. You know, that's unheard of, isn't it?
I'm still paying mine.
Right, yeah. But the Navy were offering scholarships. So in your 3rd year, if you applied, you could get a cadetship. So the Navy paid for your dental degree, and in return you had to pay them back. So for me, it was a good deal because I could, you know, focus on my study and not have to have 3 or 4 part-time jobs to
get you through.
To get through.
How was working in the Navy like?
Very good, yeah, very good start. I mean, money was not a problem. Patients just went for the best quality treatment because it was not their fund. They didn't have to pay a cent out of their own pocket.
So you did the best quality work.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. And it was really unusual because when I finished with the Navy and I went to the UK to study to be an orthodontist, that was another 3 years. During that time, I worked part-time in a general dental practice. And the quality of general dentistry in the UK, I don't know what it's like now, but back then they had what's called National Health Service,
NHS,
which was just the worst dentistry. And everyone thinks, oh yeah, I used to be that good when I was in Australia. I'll just slacken off just to, you know, and then I'll get back to this level. And then sometimes you get into bad habits. And so I think we're very lucky in Australia. Our standard of dental care, it's just really, I travelled the world.
Yeah.
And I think the quality of dentistry we provide for our patients in Australia is second to none. Of course, it comes with a cost.
Agreed.
And that's where sometimes it's a problem where the patients can afford that treatment. And you know, to this day, I'm lucky as an orthodontist, no one can fly to Thailand 18 times to do their braces, right?
Yeah.
For the high-end stuff, implants, veneers, you know. A lot of people fly outside of Australia thinking they're getting a bargain, but really...
But how do you explain to people, I guess, the reason why it's so expensive? What can we, maybe our profession, do about it?
Yeah, I think the reason it's so expensive is the cost of the materials. You know, I always say a general medical practitioner has a very low cost to set up a clinic. You know, it's like a desk, a prescription pad, you know, a stethoscope. He doesn't have
Yeah.
the cost of a dental chair and all the materials that expire and all the stuff you have to
The
keep,
rent,
etc.
the electricity.
Yeah. Of course, you know,
Staff.
and patients don't appreciate that. They compare it. I mean, I don't do fillings, but I mean, if you compare one surface filling to dining out in a restaurant,
But a meal lasts you for an hour.
Correct.
Whereas a filling can last you up to 10 years.
Absolutely.
So when you amortize, I think whatever dental treatment you're getting over a lifetime or 10 years, it's actually a very small amount. But
Correct.
you have to amortize it over the long term.
Yeah.
Tell us about your business ventures. Have you ventured much outside of dentistry?
Yeah, I mean, the first venture outside of orthodontic practice was teaching.
Yes.
So I guess during COVID, when a lot of people were not doing well because they weren't able to see patients, we were booming because we were doing online lectures
Yes.
when people had time to listen to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was watching.
Yeah. So if you didn't have that plan B,
Yeah.
it was very difficult. I mean, people in the restaurant industry adapted. They said, okay, let's do
Uber.
takeaway. Let's do home dining experiences where we prepare the meals and you can still pretend to dine at home. So if you thought outside the box, you survived. But if you only had plan A and no plan B, you didn't do well. So I always say to dentists, even though you might be very successful today, who knows what the economy will do. And, you know, in orthodontics, no one dreamed when I graduated that there'd be online aligner delivery companies that would bypass the need for an orthodontist.
What do you think of that? What's your take on it?
Look, there's no doubt that a patient needs to be properly consulted and a proper diagnosis to be made. When that happens, sure, I get the way it works. We use a lot of softwares now where the patient doesn't even need to come into the office. We monitor them from home. But the diagnosis has still been done correctly by a specialist in the field. But again, it comes down to money. You know, these companies are offering clear aligners for $3,000.
Yeah.
Sometimes for a young dentist, that's the lab fee,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But there's no attachments on the teeth. There's no IPS to create room. There's no long-term retainers to stop the teeth moving, you know? So in a way, I think it's going to generate more business for us in years to come.
Yeah.
When people have gone for the quick, you know.
Cheap fix. It ends up being more expensive
Exactly,
in the long term.
yes.
And I think I recently read it's being banned in New Zealand and there are some medical legal.
Yeah, I know one of the bigger companies in Australia has been heavily fined by ACCC for false advertising.
Yeah.
And I think, don't quote me, you got like a $2 million fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of their customer base, if you think about it.
But the future of orthodontics is definitely clear aligner therapy.
Yeah.
But again, done in a controlled environment. And I think it's a great time now for dentists to learn how to do orthodontics because it's not as technically demanding as it used to be. When I graduated, it was all about bending wires and putting brackets on correctly. It's a bit of a black magic to move teeth. Now a computer does it for you. So if you're actually a good computer guy, you can be a very good orthodontist.
And you can see the transformation. And
Yeah.
you can show and educate the patient.
Exactly.
Yes.
And the good thing about orthodontics, and I keep banging on about this, there's no pain. The patients look and feel better day by day. You know, it's not the same when, you know, the patient doesn't see a dentist regularly and comes in with an abscess. Their experience is always going to be terrible.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Whereas orthodontics, we normally have clean, healthy mouths. The people are motivated. It's a chosen part of the profession.
And the end result is always exciting for the patient.
Exactly. Absolutely.
That's the best part. I'm curious to know, how did your journey go from 1 clinic to 6 clinics?
Look, again, in orthodontics, it's very different to dentistry. If you find a good dentist, you will travel halfway across Sydney to keep that relationship.
Yeah.
Orthodontics is like 4 weekly, 6 weekly appointments.
Yeah.
So if you live in Manly and I have a practice, I only had one practice when I started in Randwick.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of people who travel from everywhere because we were one of the first clinics in Australia, and I'm very proud of this, to be doing early intervention, to be working alongside ear, nose and throat. So, you know, this is 30 years ago. We were looking at airway, we were looking at widening the palate, and a lot of parents like that, a lot of dentists like that.
Yeah.
But then when someone from Manly on their 4th visit, because the kid's broken something, has to drive in Sydney traffic.
Yeah.
An hour and a half to, it doesn't become a joyous occasion for anyone. So then you realise, okay, if you need to, if I was clever enough, I probably in hindsight would have opened a clinic in every Westfields. Because,
really?
yeah, I mean, Frank Lowry knows the business model. And if you look at where he sets up the Westfields, the very first Westfield was in Liverpool, by the way.
Actually?
Yeah. That's why it's called Westfields. It was west of some open fields. Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah. So that almost becomes like an area where people come to do their shopping and,
get their braces
and things like that. So I set up areas in Sydney that I knew that there was a big population. My second practice was in Parramatta to service all the patients in the west. Then we have a north branch and we have a south branch. So I've got a model where people come from Brazil, Argentina, India, and they come and work for me as a dental nurse or a treatment coordinator, so they understand my model, the way I think, and then I help them to pass their dental council exams, and then they're able to work in the mouth, but they want to go back to just being an orthodontist, and it's very hard for an overseas trained dentist to become an orthodontist unless they go back and do another full-time orthodontic degree, which many of them probably can't afford when they've had to pay relocation to this country. The ADC exams are very expensive, and I wouldn't say they're a very fair exam at the best of times. So many people have to repeat that process 2 or 3 times to a huge cost. So that model's worked very well for me. It's kind of like my doctors become extended members of my family. They were working in the clinical setting. They then did my EODO program so that they, even though they're an orthodontist, they may not have learned what I teach, which is a whole different type of orthodontics. So then when they start treating my patients, I'm very confident that patient's going to get the ultimate care. Most orthodontists in Australia, they don't treat the patient either. They have nurses doing most of the work, oral health therapists, etc. We're very proud at Full Face Orthodontics. Only a doctor with postgraduate education will treat the patients.
So it's a very smart model in terms of like your team stays with you and you retain them.
Correct.
And they're loyal to you because you've helped them even throughout their journey. But I think in any practice owner listening to us would understand that going from one practice to 6 or even 2, HR problems arise.
Absolutely.
And keeping a team, no matter how loyal they are, and how you help them throughout their journey, there's a lot of problems that do arise. How did you foster that, and how did you ensure, I guess, a good, healthy team environment?
We do a lot of training, even from nursing, because we get a lot of nurses who have done their level 3, but they've never assisted orthodontically. So we have a senior nurse who's been with me now for 35 years, right? And she puts them through 1 week of intensive orthodontic training. So they understand, and then for a lot of them, they have the ability to travel in different locations, which sometimes better than working the same location 5 days a week. We have a branch now in Melbourne, and we're growing the practice around Victoria. So a lot of my Sydney people, they quite like the opportunity to work in Melbourne on a Thursday, Friday, and then have the weekend there. They get flown down there, etc. So we try and look after our team as best we can. It is hard to retain staff in the current environment because there's just not enough trained receptionists or trained nurses. Every dentist I speak to, one of the reasons I joined the ADA Council in New South Wales was to try and make it easier for the dentists in private practice to have trained staff. We're trying to build a model where rather than attract 25-year-olds who really don't know what they want to do, you can try and get the woman coming back into the workforce because their children have just gone back to school and give them the opportunity, and they become very loyal staff members. So we've, from a dentist model, we're very good because I can handpick my best students to work for me. From a staff model, I've gone away from the younger staff. When I say younger, I mean give me a 40-year-old woman with a mortgage and 2 kids.
Who's going to be committed.
Exactly.
That mate, you just half of the audience who are young listening to this. Not all young people.
Not all young people. I mean, I guess I'm talking about my experience.
So, what is some things that you look for when hiring a team member?
Their ability to travel. I mean, can they? I showed my 6 locations. And you may be required in any of those. Is that okay? As opposed to someone who says, I only want to walk to work. That's not going to work in my model.
Yeah.
The other thing is the team. How will they contribute to the team? And I've done a lot of these Dale Carnegie courses, etc., where you ask the right questions on whether that will be a team player or not. Because you can get someone who's fantastic, but just creates havoc amongst the rest of the team. And when you we have 89 full-time staff, not including the doctors.
Wow.
That's a big family that we've got to get on.
Yes.
And I'm not saying it's easy, but I think setting some incentives, setting some goals, letting the staff share in the profit, meaning you're doing well, they can see you're doing well, and they're still on the same. And unfortunately, Australia for many years has paid a very low wage for a dental assistant when you compare. That's changed now because there's such a shortage of dental assistants, but back in the day, no one stayed in the dental industry as an assistant because they weren't given roles outside of just mixing alginate or sucking saliva.
There's a lot more. A dental assistant.
Correct. And I get my assistants involved in talking to patients, making them understand the treatment plan so they can help the patient on their journey. And I think the more empowerment you can give to a staff member, the more they enjoy their job.
100%.
As opposed to doing a repetitive. Imagine I see in some clinics there's one girl, her only job is to be in the stereo room and put the dirty instruments into the autoclave and get them ready. I don't know how anyone would do that.
I would get bored.
That's like factory,
I would die.
right? Yeah.
I would die.
Yeah. So we rotate our nurses. They get one day in stereo, sure, they know how to do it, but then they're chair side, or they're helping me as a treatment coordinator talking to the new parent about what the child's experience may be.
Yeah. You touched on, I guess, giving your team a bit of empowerment. A lot of practice owners and dentists, we're trained to, I guess, look at the tiniest details from etching for 20 seconds or, bonding. And I think that carries on to managing a team sometimes.
Oh,
There's a lot of micromanaging.
Yeah, dentists are the most anal people in the world.
Yes, I agree.
I have lots of friends who are dentists. Obviously, all my students are dentists. My referring base are dentists. But sometimes when I just want to sit down and have a social catch-up dinner, all dentists talk about is dentistry. Have you noticed that?
I have. I'm guilty of it.
And think about when they went through dental school, when a crown wasn't fitting, like it was a 1 millimeter margin, that 1 millimeter meant they failed that case.
Yes.
And so you think about the mental anguish and how nowadays, how many professions have loops that you can see such other than jewelers and stuff like that. So I get a lot of dentists. Yeah, a lot of dentists then. Orthodontics is not an exacting science. I can be an orthodontist, so I'm 100, I can still vaguely see, right? Yeah. Try doing that as a dentist.
You can't.
Orthodontics is all about delegation. Yeah. You have younger people with better eyes than you. You're using this because you've done that class 3 jaw. This is your millionth case that you're treating, and you kind of can do that with your eyes closed. Yeah. Whereas for a young graduate, they're looking at that going, oh my God, when should I treat that? Will that jaw grow? What will happen if I do the braces and then they have late growth? So the hard thing in orthodontics is the planning. The easy thing is the clinical. So for me, delegation, and for every orthodontist, delegation is what it's all about. I laugh when my good friend who was the best man at my wedding, he said, you orthodontists got it made, you run a harem clinic, right? And when you think about it, when we have our morning meeting, you see 12 young assistants there all ready for their day, and we go through a lot of patients. It's very hard for one of my students who's used to 1-hour appointments as a dentist, seeing 5-10 minute appointments, seeing 200 patients a day.
200 a day.
That's that's
wow.
Not just one. We have 3 dentists working on that.
So,
6 chairs, but they're short appointments. I mean, to change a wire or to check an aligner, it literally is a 5-minute appointment.
Yeah. Wow.
But the volume and the pressure is there.
But learning to delegate itself is a skill.
I think it is. And some people, because, I don't know, they only trust themselves, they just can't delegate and they end up being burnt out. You know, when they want to do everything themselves, they become non-productive.
That's true.
Yeah.
So what's your advice, I guess, to someone to learn to delegate better?
I think in their own personal structure, they've got to let go.
Yeah.
And that might be doing some classes that are non-dental, related to their psyche.
Yeah.
Secondly, you know, realizing when they look at other people who've empowered their staff and that staff member enjoys the job a lot more, stays longer. And then they might, that same dentist who you're kind of describing, I guess, has a high staff turnover for that reason.
Yeah.
Because their glass is always half empty.
Yeah.
They can never say to that staff member, well done, you did a great job. So I say, oh my God, you didn't do this, and I might as well have done it myself. Yeah, that's, you know, we've all had those miserable bosses. I have before I opened my clinic, you know. And I always made the point that when I opened my first clinic, it would be a little bit more of a friendly environment that wasn't so focused on minute details.
Yeah. Going back to your business ventures, so you talked about education. What other ventures have you?
I've only had 2 ventures, and they're probably a bit left stream, but they've been super successful for me. One is restoring classic cars, and I have so my 2 best friends from school. One school mainly, not dental school, but you know, high school.
Wow.
One became a mechanic.
Yeah.
And he and I stayed in touch. We both like sports cars, and he taught me a lot of stuff on things. So, and this is where dentistry helped me. So I own 4 or 5 classic Ferraris, and to get parts for these to restore them is impossible because there might only be 20 of these cars left in the world, right?
Wow.
But with scanning technology, I was able to teach my best friend how to totally metal inject mold a part, just like a CEREC machine.
Wow.
Yeah, so we can
get the digital snacks.
Yeah, so you think about it, when car parts are made, you have to buy $1 million machine to make this part again and again and again. And when those parts run out of stock, that machine is no longer functional.
Yeah.
Whereas you can keep one car. So I've just restored a 12-cylinder Testarossa car. If only 5 cylinders were working. But the cylinders working, you can scan and you can mold and you can get it working again. So yeah, but it's the best investment. A Ferrari is the only car, not the only car, maybe one of the few cars that you drive it off the lot, and if you buy a new car, after a week it's probably worth 15% less than it was worth, and after 5 years, forget it, right?
Yeah.
A Ferrari actually does that.
So
right?
buy a Ferrari.
Yeah.
Take note.
Yeah. A classic Ferrari.
Classic Ferrari.
Yeah.
So you got into, that's your business though? Or is it your way of
hobby?
like accumulating?
My hobby, but it's become a better, putting money in the bank is the worst investment you'll ever do.
Yeah.
Right? When you think about
especially
the return.
now with inflation.
Exactly.
Your money means nothing.
Yeah. So my parents always said,
Save
work and
for
save hard,
save,
right? And put money in the bank. I mean, that money hasn't achieved anything. No. I can tell you, buying a classic car, putting a bit of extra time, which is a hobby. Yeah. And then just keeping that car year after year and just watching what that car's worth. Yeah. It's unbelievable. It's like 100 times more the investment that you get in.
What did you, if you don't mind me asking, invest in your first car, and how much is it worth now?
My first car, it's 150,000. Yeah. It's currently worth, depending on where I want to sell it, about 4 mil. Wow. Yeah.
That's better than any crypto.
I think so, and it's a real asset. I mean, you see it every day. It's a joy.
You get to drive it?
Yeah, you do, but these cars are registered with club days, so you can only drive it on the circuit. Yeah. No one would insure it otherwise. No one's going to insure a $4 million car.
That's crazy.
So you can. I have them all stored in a nice setting in the garage. I like going there with my friend and just hearing it start up. it's like an amazing.
They are
feeling.
you.
It is. Yeah. So
amazing.
that's one venture. The other venture, my other best friend, he did chemical engineering.
Yeah.
And he had a bit of a wild life, right? I mean, we all grew up in the mean streets of Liverpool, right? So when he became a chemical engineer, he started making ecstasy tablets, you know, the party drugs? Yeah.
Okay.
If you ever think of the Wolf on Wall Street movie, that was that guy.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, unfortunately, he went to jail for 5 years. And during that time, you had to, what's the word?
Evaluate?
You have to pick something to do that would help
reinvent.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the right word. Anyway, it gets you ready to go back to being
back to society.
Back to society, right?
Yeah.
I can't believe it. So he decided to do viticulture. Now, viticulture is learning how to grow grapes and how to make wine.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So when he got out of jail, obviously very hard for him to get a job with that sort of record. But he was still my friend, and I think he was just got in the wrong crowd at the wrong time.
Yeah.
You know? It's funny, but I mean, in jail, of course, he found is the word Allah, or is he found
God.
So he found God, Allah. So he's now totally converted, and he has a very never gets drunk. Nothing like the guy you used to know.
Wow. So I think it's good, like, people can turn around.
Exactly.
You can give people second chances. Yeah.
And as a result, I always loved wine, and I decided that it would be worth investing in buying a vineyard.
Yeah.
But I needed someone to look after the vineyard and to make things. And so we went into business together, and our winery has gone really well.
Where is your wine?
It's in Central Otago, which is in New Zealand. And Central Otago grows a very unique grape. Everyone's heard of the grape Pinot Noir. So in Pinot Noir, there's 2,000 varieties. Okay. But in this area of Central Otago, the grape varietal is called the Abel clone, which is a 666. It's a Burgundian French grape, and it's very highly sought after.
Wow.
But you can grow the grape really well, but then making the wine is not as easy. There's 300 steps before you taste that glass of wine.
Really?
Yeah. And this guy,
do they all involve manual labour?
The first part does. The first part is basically farming.
Yeah.
But then the fermentation process and using the correct yeasts, etc. That's all chemical engineering, which he excels at.
Yeah.
So with his knowledge and I guess my investment, and again another hobby, it's become a very successful venture for us. Yeah. You can Google us Mahony Estate Wines.
When did you open up?
It's been now let's see. I'm sorry, I think it'd be 15 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
long
yeah.
time.
But it took us a long time to reap the first. When you plant grapes, you don't even get a return for 3 years. That's the first crop.
Really?
And then you've got to keep working on that. Work on what they call the terroir, which is the soil level and the irrigation. I'm just giving you an idea. We have a small vineyard, and it's at a high altitude that sometimes gets frost. So your entire year's production can go overnight, right? So the bigger companies, not far from us, they hire helicopter pilots to churn up the air to stop the freezing point, right? You know how much the cost of a helicopter is per hour, so we can afford that. But because he's clever and he's an engineering background, he converted the sprinkler system to plug into a hot water pipe. So when an alarm goes off, when you get near freezing point, and he sprays warm mist and things like that. So you learn so much. So they're my two hobbies, which is...
I take 2 lessons from this.
Yeah.
You have found someone who's an expert at something.
Correct.
And you have delegated, I guess, trusted them into producing that product. And it's, with your knowledge as well, it's succeeded. So I guess delegation to people who have better knowledge than you in a certain field.
Absolutely.
And I've learned something else. You mentioned about it takes 3 years. So I guess there's a famous quote: "The day you plant the seed is not the day you harvest."
Absolutely. And that's so true.
And that is true in life.
Maybe that is that a wine term? I'm not sure.
I think in every plant you have to wait.
Yeah.
Same with life, and I think of us as humans. We're plants as well in certain ways. We need to have mental health in check, look after our mental health, our physical health, oral health, of course.
Yes.
But no, even spiritually, and it takes time for you to grow. But I think we always have this pressure on ourselves that, especially now with instant technology and social media, we need to see results today. I need my investment to be up today. Why is my practice not doing so well? Why aren't patients flooding through the door? Why X, Y, Z? But it takes time. Yeah. And it can all be risked as well. Like with something
everything's
small,
a risk.
Everything's a risk.
I always, I have good friends from dental school who decided to venture in something they knew nothing about. A lot of them bought a restaurant.
Yes.
And when I asked them, what made you think you could run a restaurant? And their answer is, well, I dine out a lot, I know. And I said, and that's why you see them back doing full-time dentistry. So to me, at least, these were hobbies that I knew a little bit about before I invested money in.
Yeah.
And I think that's another key point, Don't invest money in a business that you know nothing about. Because at the end of the day, the most successful businesses come from you being there.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I guess that leads to the question: what is one of your biggest failures to date?
I think trying to run and operate clinics in other countries, I think would be the biggest disaster. In Brazil.
Why Brazil? There's so many dentists and orthodontists. Believe it or not, I met an orthodontist. He's married to an orthodontist.
Yeah.
His dad is some sort of dentist specialty. His mom, you're probably aware of him. He's got 50 dentists in the family.
Right.
Everyone in Brazil feels like a dentist.
Yeah.
Why Brazil?
Look, my ex-wife was Brazilian, and so as a result, I was going to Brazil so often. And I like the country. But then again, the big mistake is you're in a country with a different time zone, a different language, a different culture. And you can't then replicate what's been successful you in Australia and bring it there.
Yeah.
So at the end, luckily, I was able to sell the clinic off to my brother-in-law, who's an orthodontist from Brazil. But that was like, I talk about ways I've made money. That's a great way to lose money.
Yeah.
But again, I thought with my heart, not with my brain.
Yeah.
So I would say that would be my biggest failure as far as economic.
Yeah. So I guess maybe would have helping. I guess understanding the culture, knowing the people of the place would be better.
Yeah, or just realise that many cultures, like Brazil, is such a corrupt country.
Yeah.
So it works on bribery, and you can see that nowadays. So the staff don't have the honesty levels like we have here in Australia. There's all these sorts of cultural things that you don't see as a tourist.
Yeah.
But then when you speak to other people, they say, I could have told you that, blah, blah, blah. So maybe doing your research a little bit more in depth, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Did you try anywhere else?
Yeah, in Vanuatu. And again, that was a successful clinic until I realised I just couldn't be flying there so often. And the more you're not there, so even though I have 6 clinics, I spend 1 full day in each clinic and I'm totally involved in the day-to-day
Does that
management.
mean you work 6 days a week still?
Yeah, still. Yeah.
When would you...
When would I change it? I actually...
Not change that. I guess like sometimes you think, okay, I've reached a certain level. I know you don't need to work.
Yeah.
They probably... Do you think they could run without you?
Yeah, I think that, look, many times they have when I travelled and lectured overseas, but patients still want to see your face, because you're still the brand. But that I've changed in the last 5 years. I hope my next 10-year plan is to let the clinics run themselves, and I only need to consult in the difficult cases from a remote location.
Yeah.
And then what I want to do is continue my overseas education. So the successful 3-year orthodontic program we've had for years in Sydney, I'd like to take that to different continents.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Go back to the UK.
Yeah.
Lecture more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Who would you say are the 3 people that have influenced your life, or mentors that you look up to throughout your journey?
Not just dental mentors?
No,
or
not dental.
Everything?
Just
Look, in life, definitely my mum and dad. I think he was an engineer, my mum was a teacher. They really had an amazing work culture. So I would say who I am today is very much as a result of their upbringing. On a professional level, I would have to say Professor Linda Aronson. So when I was a young orthodontist, not knowing anything about airway problems, I was lucky enough to spend 6 months on a sabbatical as an education in the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. He was the one who first alerted me to the link between a malocclusion, bad bite, narrow jaw, and breathing. So I did a 3-year degree in orthodontics, and not once was there even a lecture on that. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So lucky early on I learned from him, and I think he really fully influenced and shaped the way I currently practice to what I was taught. And what has put full face orthodontics and my teaching program, EODO, the point of difference is think airway first, and early
Believe it or not, like in dental school is still something you have to go out of your way to learn about.
And that's a pity, isn't it? Because I did so many lectures in dental school on things that I don't even do today. Like we had denture, it was like 2 years of the 5 years was just learning how to make denture. Who makes a denture in this day?
I think the only thing taking away from dentures is the basis of digital smile design.
Sure.
How a smile forms, but 2 years is a long time for something.
Whereas you could have spent half a term on understanding sleep. I have a degree in sleep medicine, a degree in dentofacial orthopedics, a degree in orthodontics. Those 3 degrees have helped me really understand the literature, understand the time to treat and when to treat. And I'm still a student myself. Every time there's going to be something new upcoming. But one thing that doesn't change, and that is you've got a window of opportunity to influence facial growth. And if you miss that window, you're already on the back foot. So Linda Aronson would be number 2, I guess. And then number 3, again in my field, my profession, would be a chap called Dr. Damon, and the system called the Damon system is world famous. But Dr. Damon made me realize that if you move teeth with very light forces, you actually create new bone, and as a result, there's less need to pull out your teeth. Linda Aronson taught me all about mixed dentition, early treatment, airway, facial growth, but I still get adults who come to see me, a 21-year-old, a 40-year-old. I can't really do a lot for them as far as what I do for kids. But I can still treat them much better than what I was taught by using these light forces. And so the term is called passive self-ligation. It's a big component of our adult program. It's thanks to his research and the numerous lectures I attended. And I remember flying to the US 6 times a year for 3 years to really learn from this guy, go to his clinic, watch his cases, and I'd never go back to the older type of orthodontics that we did.
I guess what you do in the first few years of your career, whether in dentistry or any career, really, really transform the rest of your life.
Yes.
How do you see now for new graduates coming out into dentistry? What's the future like in dentistry, given the current economics, the current recession as well?
Look, I don't think any new graduate would have like what I call the golden era that I was lucky enough to be in. I graduated in 87 when I first started working. Back then there was a shortage of dentists. There was oversupply. So there was more demand than we could need. Now it's almost the opposite, right? Blame it on too many dental schools, too much overseas dentists coming. I don't know, you can blame it on whatever. But the point of difference is the patient's way of thinking about their dentist has changed. When I graduated, there was no advertising. The dentist was a very personal word of mouth relationship. The only way you could advertise was to give you a card, which had to have very specific letters. You couldn't have your letter bigger than, it was really like that. Now everything's corporate.
Yeah.
So when I ask a patient who comes to me, who is your dentist? 90% of the time they don't know, right?
They don't have a...
They would say, we just go to that guy in Caringbah, near the station. Or they say, well, we're a Bupa patient, we just go to the local Bupa. Yeah. So that relationship doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the way our profession has gone, I don't know. Whereas in the past, it was always a patient came with a referral letter and they were very loyal to Dr. John and they'd see him every 6 months for years, that sort of thing. So I think for a new graduate, maybe try and go back to that old school way of doing things. Don't rely on social media as much. Rely on the old building relationship type things.
Yeah.
Where always ask the question when you finish work on someone. I still do that today. When I am doing an exit strategy, where the patient's been checked on their retainer and they're very happy with the result, I make a point personally of asking the question, Mrs. Jones, we've been so happy with you as a client. Do you know anyone as nice as you who would benefit from our services? A family, a relative, and if you do, here's a card that gives them a free consultation. Just that simple 1 minute line builds our product base. And that patient always refers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more.
And nothing beats word of mouth. It's
Correct.
The way people trust each other these days.
So I think the message, if I can pass it on, is try not to do what everyone else is doing. You've got to be that unique point of difference.
Yeah, 100%. We're coming to a conclusion, although I can talk to you for hours, I feel like. What are some questions that, if you were in my shoes, you would want me to ask you as your host?
Oh, that's a tough one because you've asked pretty much all the questions. You did your research, you did a good job. Maybe where do I see Derek Mahony in 2023 or 10 years from now?
10 years.
Well, next year we're already planning our schedule. We are building the full face name, now comparing with corporate entities to go to areas in rural New South Wales, rural Victoria, etc., that don't have an orthodontist.
Okay.
Places like Ballarat, where the orthodontists are there or almost closed their books, and there's a huge waiting. And I'd learned that because patients travel 2 hours from Ballarat to Melbourne to see me.
Yes.
we're.
So how are you guys trying to against that gap? Have more orthodontists go?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm offering now for the first time to my junior orthodontist the ability to buy in, but not have to buy in on a big level. It's very hard for a new graduate to set up a fully fledged orthodontic practice, 8 chairs, CBCT, blah blah. You're talking upwards of $2 to $3 million, right? On top of the building, which might be $5 million. So what we're offering is building provided, reputation already there with the corporate logo, and the ability for them to slowly buy 5%, 10%, keep skin in the game. That allows us to keep, because without that orthodontist, we can't run the clinic.
No.
But we already have the systems in place and the training that allows all this to happen.
So beneficial model for everyone.
And then hopefully those clinics would kind of run themselves because the systems that we've used in the last 35 years that have made us successful will continue to be followed, to adhere to. So I think that's the only question I can think of.
Exciting, keep an eye out. Dr. Derek, thank you so much for your time. You've been incredibly generous. It's my honor to have you on MaskOFF. Everybody, keep an eye out for another episode with another inspiring leader. Thank you.